Hello and welcome to a special early in the day edition of the CBB Super Show, brought to you and powered as always by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. Normally I'm up late doing the show, and a lot of you on the East Coast are fast asleep. You guys check me out on demand. I appreciate it. But we had a few requests, and especially from the wife of Dub Deuces, to do a morning show because nighttime with the kids is so difficult. And, I'm planning to go to the daily show format here in the next week or two, just covering every single slate, giving you guys all the content you can possibly handle. So messing around with different show times. Still going to be doing the Monday night and Friday night show. So this Friday I'll be going on at 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST. Might get an appearance by our own Mike Kutry. We'll see. But this week doing Wednesday morning and tomorrow morning also at 11 a.m. PST. It's 2 p.m. for those of you on the East Coast. Perfect time, I'm sure. Still in the before noon hour for us on the West Coast. But I'm feeling really good. We're going to knock this slate out and we're going to win money, green screens, lots of opportunities here. It's March Madness. It's officially March 1st. We're in it to win it. If this is your first time checking out the show, I'd like to take a second to welcome you and let you know what we do here. Do cover the DFS side of things for CBB in a game-by-game format, giving you, players that I like, sneaks, maybe somebody that I think is going to be higher owned, predict some rostership, anybody that I, don't like that maybe the industry does, and go through and give a core at the end as well. I also talk about PrizePicks at the end. Typically at night, we don't have a full board, but here in the daytime hours, we have probably what is going to be the full board. So we'll give you guys some PrizePicks plays to knock out, and then also we'll look at the betting side of things. We'll get some props going, maybe some sides, all of that stuff. But we're in it. Conference tournaments. If you're returning to the show, please pull up your seat. You guys have your name tags and your desk. You know what to do. Hit that like button if you're new to the show or if you're a veteran. Appreciate all the continued support. The more you guys interact with us in the chat, the more you watch all of our shows on the FTN Network and like those various shows. It helps us within the YouTube algorithm. So when anybody searches for sports, especially March Madness, NCAA, tournaments, buzzer beaters, any of that kind of stuff, yours truly in the CBB Super Show will be what pops up. So thank you very, very much. All right, we're going to get into it, but first I want to make sure you guys know at ftndaily.com and ftnbets.com, there is a promotion going on. If you use the code DUB, you'll get yourself 20% off that first month. If you pay for an annual sub, you'll get 20% off the duration. And right now is a fantastic time of year for sports. Not only are we going into buzzer beater city here with March Madness, but we're into, the baseball season starting. There's spring training stuff going on. Our team here at FTN, sharp baseball minds. NHL, going on, approaching the end of the season there. Lots of stuff happening. We've got NBA. We've got esports. We've got everything going on. Just a great, great time. Not only do we provide content such as articles, slate breakdowns, but we have, exposures, betting trackers. We also have an optimizer for pro sports, Discord, which we talk about, especially in college sports, strategy-wise, starting lineups, late scratches, anything of that nature. If there's some kind of late news that we can use to gain an edge, we will have it. We have a myriad of people in the Discord. If I can't be on at that time, somebody else picks up the slack. A lot of us check out team message boards. We do that extra mile of information there to help you be the best possible player. And at the end of the night, get those green screens and build up on your bankroll, whether that's from a DFS standpoint, PrizePicks, props, betting, whatever it is. Everyone at the team here trying to do their best to help you win money. I personally obviously love winning money. Who doesn't? But I am one of the few birds who like seeing others win money, and especially if it's from content that we are able to help you out with, put you on the right play, get you in the right direction at least, or help you with your research process, win a ticket, money, whatever it is. We like that. Makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Conference tournaments going on the FTN Bet site. I just released a Big South preview. We are doing every single conference tournament from a betting standpoint. WCC, I will be dropping tomorrow morning. Randall's over there. Mike Randall's already dropped a few for the Atlantic Sun and some other tournaments going on. So make sure if you're a member of the FTN Bet side, you go check out those conference tournaments. We provide you with our thoughts from a favorite, maybe a sneakier play, a value, long shot, all these different things for you to get your betting thing going on. More and more states are opening up to betting, which is very fun. Lots of opportunities right now. All right, man. Daytime show. Let's get it. 2 coffees in. Yes. Let's check in with the chat. We are on early today. Let's go. What's up, Eddie? East Coast friendly show. Absolutely. I don't know what Pedro is on about. No white collar crime here, sir. We are only a legitimate business making legitimate money. But GTA 5 sounds like a fun game that I have not played in a while, so thank you for reminding me. But I'm not getting my GTA on here today. Just wholesome content with no interruptions from the kids because they're at school. So let's dive right into it. All right, first game on the slate is Xavier versus Providence. This is a slate that is going to be a half an hour earlier than usual yet again, so make sure you guys are planning accordingly and you don't miss out on that early slate and end up with a dummy lineup in or somebody that you didn't want. Sometimes that half an hour extra creeps up on you and you lose out there. But Xavier versus Providence, this is definitely a game that we want to initially target. These two teams, fantasy friendly wise on both sides, especially Xavier running a shorter rotation out of necessity because of the injuries that they continue to have happen. They are 29th in tempo ranking, 10th in offensive efficiency, and 74th in defensive efficiency. They did play each other once already back on February 1st. That game did go into the extra period. 85-83 was the dub for Xavier. In that game, Colby Jones had 20 points, Jack Nunge 23 and 14 rebounds. Solly Boom, 20 points, 9 assists. Jerome Hunter, 9 points, 8 rebounds. Desmond Cloud had 7 points and 5 rebounds. This game, even in the overtime period, they basically ran a rotation of 6 guys. Kai Tandy just can never get minutes anymore. It's good on him for sticking it out, but I'm surprised he hasn't transferred by now. He played just the 3 minutes. Cesare Edwards, 6. So we can look and expect a short rotation, which is typically the MO of Ed Cooley over at Providence. They usually are running themselves a 6 to 7 man rotation each and every season, and that is typically going to be the case here as well, with their starting lineup being Devin Carter, Ed Crosswell, Jared Bynum, Noah Locke, Bryce Hopkins, and off the bench we'll see Clifton Moore and Allen Breed. We've been seeing a little bit more of Clifton Moore lately, had 1 or 2 shares of him on the last slate, the LaSalle transfer. Minutes are starting to trend in the right direction again. He was a pretty, relevant player for LaSalle. High usage, high shot rate, great shot blocker. So they definitely have a use for him, especially if any fouls happen with a guy like Ed Crosswell, who had a freaking ridiculous game against Georgetown last time out. 25 points, 6 assists, which is quite different for him, and 13 rebounds. Just a career performance for Ed Crosswell. Will he do that again? It seems a little unlikely against Xavier, but the type of tempo that Xavier runs and their style of play is definitely conducive to getting fantasy points. A really rough effort by Bryce Hopkins out there last time. I think at 9-7, it's a little bit of a tough ask. There's a ton of solid pay-ups on this slate, and we have 2 really good values, which we'll get to here in a little bit on the Notre Dame side. So you can fit 1 or 2 pay-ups, possibly more. I have a few favorites that I'm going to talk about, but Bryce Hopkins does not happen to be one of them at this moment in time. So he is not going to probably be in my player pool too much. I don't necessarily love the idea of chasing Ed Crosswell, but I do think he's a pretty solid look at 8.2K. We know he's going to play upwards of 32 to 35 minutes, possibly more in that overtime game there against Xavier. He did play 40 minutes, 21 real points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and a steal. So he was very strong there at the Cintas Centers. And now that they're going to be at Providence, whatever they're calling their arena now, it's gone through a couple of name changes. He's definitely worth some GPP exposure because I think he could certainly pay this off. And there's still a little bit of upside there, even at the 8.2 price. I kind of like, even though the Xavier perimeter defense tends to be a little bit stout at times, Devin Carter, I think, is my favorite play from the Friar, sitting here at 7.9K. Sub 8K on him is definitely a strong price point where he is got a built-in high floor there, has the upside to absolutely murder it. He did play 42 minutes in that overtime game against Xavier, 15 points, 5 of 9 on 2-point field goals, took 5 threes, only made 1, but he had 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a couple of steals. Nice thing about Carter flourishing in this Ed Cooley system, he doesn't have to be a big-time scorer. At times with South Carolina last season, we saw he only made value off the bench as a scorer, high-usage volume scorer. He doesn't have to play that role at Providence because they have other guys who can score, so he's able to contribute in other ways, whether that's assists, rebounds. He's been a very good on-ball defender this season, very improved in that regard, getting steals and just contributing in those secondary categories, which is what you love to see. He does have a steal rate of over 3%, a block rate of almost 4%, so contributing in the stocks, if you will, and has a usage rate over 21%. So Devin Carter is my favorite Providence play if I'm going there. Not sure that I will end up with a Fryer in my main build, but it's definitely in consideration with Carter. Second on the priority list for me is going to probably be Jared Bynum. Great environment. The price at 6'3" is definitely probably a little on the cheap side for him overall, just for this. For his role on the team currently, it might be like right in line with where he should be, but for this matchup, I think he is a little bit underpriced. We have seen him score 26 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, playing heavy minutes, obviously clearly healthy. He looked very good against Georgetown, but most people do typically look good against Patrick Ewing and the Hoyas. 18 points, 6 assists, and 2 rebounds, 35.5 fantasy points. Just been trouble getting him on the court, but now that he's fully healthy, he looks good. He shot 3 of 12 against Xavier, which was rough, but still scored 29 fantasy points against them last time, which shows you even on a bad shooting night, he has the chops to still make value. Had 5 rebounds and 6 assists in that one. Looking at his rates, 20.8% usage rate, 21.2% shot rate, a 28.8% assist rate, which is top 100 in the country, shooting 33% from long range. In the conference, his three-point shooting has been much better. In 14 Big East games, he's shooting 43%, which is the 3rd best mark in the conference, and he has the 5th best assist rate in the conference at 27.8%. So Jared Bynum definitely has to be in consideration at 6'3", and he's a reasonable play. If you want to go with a more balanced approach to your lineup and fill it up with 6 to 8K guys, Bynum definitely should be probably at the top of that list. And I still like throwing Clifton Moore out there at 3-4, just in case those minutes are going to continue to trend up. I know last time out was a blowout, which theoretically would mean that's why those minutes spiked to 25, sure. But in the blowout the other way against UConn, he played 12. I think he settles into a nice 15 to 18-minute role for the Friars. And again, there's possibility for more depending on foul issues with the rest of the front court. So at 3-4, if you're one of the people that are doing the MME thing, CSV thing, running multiple lineups, throw him out in 1 or 2 lineups. It definitely could pay off. Xavier side, Zach Fremantle's still out. We know that. Kai Tandy has been dealing with a foot injury, so he's not going to play, but he barely plays any minutes anyways. All it really means is that this rotation for Xavier will remain extremely short, and we know where those minutes are going to come from, and we know where the production is going to come from. Just an absolute domination of Seton Hall last time out. They won 82-60. Very balanced effort. Colby Jones had 19 real points. Adam Kunkel had 13 and 5. Sully Boom had 23, 4 and 3. Jerome Hunter 12 and 9. And then Jack Nunge had 8, 5 and 5. He's been, I think, burning out a little bit for Jack, old Jack boy. Without Fremantle, he's looking a little bit of a step slow out there. So tread carefully with Jack, just because I think all these minutes are starting to wear him out a little bit. Desmond Cloud did play 32 minutes off the bench. Again, that was a bit of a blowout. And we did see Cesare Edwards play 18, but I don't know that we'll see any large blowouts in one way or the other. So I'm not too certain, even at 3K, that you want to get involved with Cesare Edwards just yet. Deep GPP type look, sure, but I'm not going to fall for that. I think he's probably going to fall back down and play a role that's around 5 minutes, unless there's major foul issues. I think at this point, the Xavier guys, you want to go in a pecking order of Sully Boom at 8K. That's a really nice price for him. He's been 9K at times this season. Second would be Colby Jones at 8.3. And then I would skip down to Adam Kunkel at 6'8", and then go to Jack Nunge before Jerome Hunter, even at 6'4". I know Hunter at 6'4" is a little intriguing, but Nunge at 9K almost is kind of off the table for me. And I think a lot of people will feel that way. So running it back into tournaments for a large field, there's a little bit of leverage there because he does have slate breaking upside. We've seen him do it before. I just think if you're looking for a main team, single entry, high dollar, Soli Boom and Colby Jones make a little bit more sense. Colby Jones especially, he's not going to necessarily put up these 40, 45 fantasy point games that some of the others will, but he rarely dips under. I know last game he didn't do so well, 23 fantasy points, but again, that was a blowout. Usually in competitive games that remain close, he's typically going to hover around 30 to 32 fantasy points. So he has a really nice, strong, high floor for you there if you're looking for some consistency. This time of season, we start to see, guys tire out. We see landmines galore. We saw it last night. Every night we see landmines. So avoiding those type of players and putting some safety in your lineups, especially if you're taking a risk at one of the lower spots, makes a lot of sense. Colby Jones at 8.3, Soli Boom at 8K. Definitely the two that I would want to look at. And the nice thing about Boom is he is not coming off the floor, and basically he can't because otherwise they just don't have anyone else to run the offense. All right, moving on here. And then, I guess I should mention 4-1 for Desmond Cloud at that price. He's in play, playing 25-ish minutes. Will he play 32? Probably not, but look for him to play around 25 to 26. He's definitely in play at this price point, although the matchup isn't that great for him. All right, moving on, we have Alabama versus Auburn. This is one that, especially on the Auburn side, I'm a little leery of targeting anyone. I have been a big proponent of staying away from teams playing Alabama. Defensively, they've just been quite incredible, and you're seeing them shut down or contain their opposing elite or alpha players quite often, which is impressive for a team with the second highest tempo in the country. You typically see a lot of fantasy points from that type of play, but Alabama has the fourth best defensive efficiency in the country, 18th best offensive efficiency. Their 2-point defense is the best as well. Their 3-point defense is second best. So they do a wonderful job of clamping down and really containing guys. Nick Smith did a good job against Alabama over the weekend, scored 24 points, 6 rebounds. So it's not as if, Alabama is going to completely zero guys out. But as we saw with yesterday, Nick Smith and Tennessee's defense, they can contain guys. Alabama can do the same. So I just want to be careful targeting some of these Auburn guys. It was a 77-69 victory for Alabama last time. Janai Broom, who is my guy all the way, struggled with foul trouble. His minutes were under 30. He had 8 points, 9 rebounds. That was all he was able to accomplish there. Coming up on the road here against Bama, this is going to be a tough spot to pay $9K for him. And I'm typically one of those guys who is, always on Broom whenever I can get him. But I'm definitely backing off a bit here on the road. I'm just a little bit nervous about the matchup. If anything, the guards like Alan Flanagan at 5'5" or KD Johnson at 4'6" to, get yourself a little bit of exposure to a fast-paced game. But the Auburn side just doesn't look that good. Flanagan has been playing over 25 minutes, looking like the Flanagan of old. At 5'5", he definitely has upside, but again, this matchup just isn't that great. Instead, we want to look towards the Alabama side and say what you will about what's going on with the program, say what you will about some immature kids, like Brandon Miller, but when it's game time and on the court, I cannot question his focus. Going into that South Carolina game last week, I thought that it would be a good idea to fade him, even though South Carolina was a great matchup for him, because I thought his focus would not be there. Clearly, I was wrong about that, as he scored 41 points, 8 rebounds in the extra period, put up 65, follows that up with 24 and 6 against Arkansas. Just continues to perform at a very high level for Bama. Coming into the season, a lot of people had Mark Sears pegged as being, the guy for them. But if you paid attention to the foreign trip they had over the summer, Brandon Miller was really crushing it each and every game there overseas, and has, come into the season here throughout at the collegiate level, playing at such a high level that he surely will be a high NBA draft pick when he decides to go. So at 9.5, you can definitely pay that price. He's safe. There's upside for 50. His floor, about 32 to 35. Definitely liking him there. Now, and then Sears is okay. Noah Clowney okay. Those are both guys that I'm kind of like last man in. I'm fine with. But where I want to kind of delve into here and be a little more specific is the value plays here on Alabama, because all season long we've struggled with getting the right values in, whether that's Javon Quinterly, my man Namari Burnett, who I still love a lot, Nick Pringle, who's flashed a little bit, Rylan Griffin, who's flashed a little bit, Jaden Bradley. These are all younger guys as opposed to Javon Quinterly, who's been around a little bit longer. Jaden Bradley, though, starting games, playing 35 minutes against South Carolina, then he goes and plays 7 against Arkansas. So really these values are probably better suited for using in GPPs only and not really targeting them in your main lineup. Trust me, it's a heartache, and you're probably not going to be on the right end about it. The one thing I can say with any certainty is that Namari Burnett, when playing, or on the floor and healthy, is getting upwards of almost 20 minutes on the lower end there, 19 to 20 minutes. And he's playing quite well, but it's not translating into the stat sheet. Unfortunately, he's 0 for 10 in his last 2 games. The wrist injury that he has flared up slightly, I've read on some of their message boards. So we'll probably stay away from him because that could cause some of his time to go down. And that's where we maybe want to look at Javon Quinterly. And those of you that have the testicular fortitude to roll him in your main lineup, I got to give you all the props in the world. He's coming off a game in which he played 28 minutes, shot 14 times, had 30 fantasy points. He has a high usage rate. He has a high shot rate. He has the capability of breaking the slate at this meager 4K price point. The problem is the must bus, if you will, or Nate Oates. He does this thing where he will, outside of Miller, Sears, and Clowney, he will just rotate around and ride the hot hand. And one thing that he does with Javon Quinterly is keeps him on an extremely short leash. If he comes out of control, playing this style of ball that, is turnover prone, or, like the game against Tennessee, he had 6 turnovers. Like if he's coming out like lackadaisical, not taking care of the basketball, he could very easily end up with 11 minutes and just torpedoing your lineup. So you have to be extremely careful using any of these guys. Oates plays a fast pace. He prefers his guys to chuck threes or dunk it. He has a very fun style, but when it comes to his rotations outside of their big 3, it's just a nightmare, hair-pulling adventure. It could very easily be Ryan Griffin that goes off here. It could be very easily Javon Quinterly. We also have to account for Charles Bediako at 5K. He's been playing well lately and getting minutes. That's a cheap price for him. But at this point, I think that it just makes a lot more sense to try those guys out or rotate your exposures through them in the large field GPPs, because trying to stick them into your main lineup just hasn't been working for us. All right, moving on to the next game. Wow, these daytime shows getting some love, huh? I just saw the view count. Love it. Welcome. Appreciate it. If you guys could slap that like button around, I'd appreciate you. All right, let's keep going. I got to be efficient. With this many people watching, I got to be efficient. Can't sidebar here too much. All right, Vanderbilt versus Kentucky. Man, Liam Robbins has been a just juggernaut of a player. Price has come all the way up to 9.8, might as well be 10K. Difficult spot now going on the road against Kentucky. I am definitely worried about a bad whistle or fouls coming up, but he has been able to contribute at a very high level. It is worth noting that the Vandy schedule has been pretty soft over the last 4 to 5 games. They've had Florida twice, which he's dominated, South Carolina, which he's dominated, LSU, which he's dominated, and then Auburn, who has a very good offense, but defensively Auburn, they're a fantasy-friendly unit. And we've seen Robbins hit that 40-plus marker in 4 of his last 5. Last game against Florida was 38 with 5 blocks. He is a shot-blocking maestro. And he is not quite matchup proof. I'm not ready to label him that. He did struggle against Alabama mightily, although they lost by nearly 60 points. But against Tennessee, he had 33, which is still a good score. But when you're getting to this 10K range, you certainly need to see more than that. It's also worth noting that Kentucky has been not a dumpster fire, but not the Kentucky that maybe we're used to seeing. They have been playing better lately. They have solid wins over Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn recently. So at 20-9, they're definitely headed in the right direction. This is their last home game of the regular season, so look for them to, play with an extra chip on their shoulder. And this might be the time that we actually go back to Oscar Tshiebwe. I've been the one that leads the bus on, fading Oscar, and I'm typically off of him, but I'm certainly very interested in him here against a very mediocre Vanderbilt team. But sticking with the Commodores, I think Liam Robbins is worth some ownership just because of how good he's been doing. Another GPP type of play. Is he going to be in the main? I'm not sure, but he's been making us a bunch of money lately. His rates, as I said, are very strong, opening those up. And Stackhouse is finally starting the guys that he should. He did this whole thing in the middle part of the season where he would bring Ezra Mannion, and Liam Robbins off the bench, but then they'd end up playing, 25 to 30 minutes off the bench and should have been starting anyways. But Liam's been starting every game since February 4th against Ole Miss, and he's been absolutely dominating ever since. So it makes sense for Stackhouse to keep doing that. However, 31.5% usage rate, that's 18th best in the country. 27.7% shot rate, that's top 200. He has a combined rebounding rate over 30%, a block rate of 15%, that's second best in the country, and a fouls drawn rate of 8.3. That's actually the best mark in the country. And in SEC games, there's been 12 of them. He has 9.9 fouls per 40, which is a massive, massive number. So with that ability to draw fouls, he could still, even on the road, get Oscar into a little bit of trouble there. Nice thing about Liam is he's a pretty tough cover for traditional bigs to try to defend. Not only can he bang down low, block shots, grab rebounds, but he can step out, drag his defender out, and hit threes. In conference plays, 15 of 30 from long range. In overall the season, 19 of 52 for a 37% mark. Definitely a guy that you want to, in your various MME builds, have a priority on. I just don't know if he's going to make it into our main build, depending on how we want to go with the rest of these pay-ups, which there are two others that I really favor near his range that we'll talk about here shortly. With the secondary players, Trey Thomas, Tyron Lawrence, Ezra Mannion, those type of guys, they're all pretty low end for me. They don't have any kind of consistency. Mannion's starting to play bigger minutes again and has looked good over his last four. He scored 22 plus fantasy points in 4 straight. The 6K price point's just a little bit too high for me because there is a rug pull that could certainly happen with his minutes, and I'm not so sure that he's going to perform all that well on the road here against Kentucky. So it's really Robbins or bust for me. On the Kentucky side, Xavier Wheeler had another procedure, some other procedure on something that was unrelated to the ankle injury that's been, costing him time. So I don't know what the deal is there, but he's going to be out for probably the rest of the season. Only a couple regular season games, but I don't even think he's going to be there for the conference tournament and beyond, which definitely hurts this Kentucky team to a degree. They did get CJ Frederick back, so they're getting healthy. Things are starting to turn around, but not having Xavier Wheeler is definitely a loss overall. In the Auburn game, which they completely just detonated and killed them by 20 plus points, the starting lineup that they are running with Xavier sideline is Cason Wallace, Antonio Reeves, Oscar Tshiebwe, Jacob Toppin, and Chris Livingston. Now, even though that game turned into a big-time 25-plus blowout, we still saw Cason Wallace, Antonio Reeves, and Oscar Tshiebwe play 35-plus minutes. A lot of times people come over from the NBA side of things. They plan for blowouts. Bench guys are going to lose minutes. At the collegiate ranks, for those of you who are new trying CBB DFS, or if you're kind of playing it sporadically, it's important to realize that blowouts matter way less than they do in the pro level because, score differential in the net rankings, coaches always being paranoid about being fired. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and you'll see them protect these big leads, and they'll play their guys deep into the game. And if they do get pulled, it's typically like under 8 minutes, under 6 minutes. It's rarely going to be like, oh, it's the 15-minute mark left in the game. Let's pull our starters. That just doesn't happen at the collegiate level unless it's like one of those ridiculously high blowouts. Of course, it can happen. It's just not a regular thing like it is in the NBA. So that's case in point there. Jacob Toppin also played 33 minutes in that game. So they still relied heavily on their starters. Chris Livingston played 23. The rest of the bench, pretty much a non-factor. CJ Frederick, only 7 minutes. Lance Ware, only 5. Damian Collins, 3. And then Adu Tiero, who I've been angling for to play more, had 10 minutes. So I want to keep our exposure here for Kentucky guys in that starting 5. Even with Wheeler out, they're still not looking to their bench. My favorite player from a DFS standpoint has been Antonio Reeves, and it's going to continue to be Antonio Reeves. My first and probably only main team play if I don't go to Oscar would be Antonio Reeves. Scoring reliant, yes, but his price still hasn't adjusted. He's been hovering around that mid 5K range. It has gone up, but it's still only at 6'1", playing upwards of 35 to 38 minutes. When they need a bucket and that offense goes stagnant, they go to Antonio Reeves. There's a reason they went out to the transfer portal and got him from Illinois State as a high-volume scorer, three-point shooter. Now, over the course of his career, he's been about a mid-30% three-point shooter. At Kentucky, he's shooting 43%. He has the third best mark in the SEC. So he has been a absolute fantastic get for the Kentucky. And now the fact that they have all these injuries and they have an offense that, usually runs through Oscar, but teams have been able to contain him to a degree. They need to generate points. They're turning to Reeves. 27.7% shot rate, which is 8th best in the SEC. And again, he's just been the guy. And without Wheeler, he's going to continue to play, even though he's a scoring reliant player. When his price hits that 6.5 or higher mark, then we can start to back off and see that, mid-20s fantasy points, he's starting to get to, his upside cap. But at this point, at 6-1 against Vanderbilt, he's still very much in play. And I think he's a lot safer than people realize. He's had some slow starts. So if you do roster him, you're going to have to endure a little bit of tilting there in the first 10 to 15 minutes. But in the second half, he's been very strong this season, and he's put up some really big scores in those second halves. So slow starter, but a big finisher. Oscar Tshiebwe, will you or won't you at 10-3? It's a tough price, but he's just put up 50 against Auburn. The big thing is he's been able to mostly, knock on wood, avoid foul trouble that's cost him any big minutes. And you'll see 36 minutes against Auburn, 38 against Florida, 34 against Tennessee, 35 against Georgia. He's on the floor playing big minutes, and his scoring is starting to go the right direction as well after slumping a little bit in the beginning of February. So I got to love Oscar here in the final home game of the season for Kentucky. For me, I'm a pretty big semi-balanced guy. So, I'll roll those values, but then I try to tend to jam in another, 5 to 6 guys between 6 to 8K instead of 2 at the 10K plus area. If you faded TJD last night, it didn't work out too well. If you used him against Michigan State a week or two ago, it didn't work out too well. It's just a hit or miss sometimes. But Oscar Tshiebwe in this spot definitely has to be in consideration and is borderline main team viable. I haven't decided quite yet if I'm going to go there, but looking at his rates, they're impressive still. 24% usage rate, an offensive rebounding rate of 18%, which is 4th best in the country, a defensive rebounding rate of 27.7%, which is 9th best in the country. He has 3% block rate, 3% steal rate. He's definitely going to do his thing against this Vanderbilt front court. It'll just be a matter of who gets who into foul trouble first between Liam Robbins and Oscar Tshiebwe. Freshman Cason Wallace has begun to settle in and really take control of the team as well. Starting to become a leader even in his young age, but playing heavy minutes, taking big shots, not as reliant on the scoring as he was earlier in the season, and he's really taken the reins over for Xavier Wheeler, who's not there. Wheeler, of course, a high assist rate, usually the guy initiating the offense. Wallace has been able to create not only for himself, but for everybody else as well. Look at his assist numbers here. 9 against Auburn, 11 against Mississippi State, 6 against Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. Just a very high level of basketball going on here for Cason Wallace and playing much better than I think people realize. His assist rate is sitting right around 25%. In conference games, 15 total SEC games he's played, it's risen to 27%, which is top 9 in the country. Not only that, but he has the 13th best block rate in the SEC and the 20th best steal rate in the SEC. So he's not only giving you a night where he could score 20 to 25 real points, but he's contributing in other areas as well. You're definitely going to have to pay a premium for him at 7-9, but I think in this spot against Vanderbilt, he looks pretty appealing, knowing that he's going to play heavy minutes, and Calipari's just not going to go to his bench much at all unless he's forced to because of fouls. Lastly, we want to look at Jacob Toppin at 7-8, GPP special. Very, very high upside at this price, capable of putting up 40. We just saw it against Auburn. You would think that with Oscar and Reeves and Wallace taking so much of that usage, there wouldn't be much left over for him. But the fact that the starters are playing so much, it does allow all 5 of those guys to eat, and they have been doing so. Also, Chris Livingston at 6-1. He just put up 35 against Florida and 30 against Tennessee, which is a tough defense. Had some early foul trouble against Auburn, which cost him dearly. He didn't play that well, but definitely in play as well. I think any of the Kentucky starting 5 are viable, but Antonio Reeves is probably still my favorite from a main team standpoint. And if I want to go up to Oscar, I don't hate that idea. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have, let's check in here. Jody, what's up, Jody? Says Oscar will be the 21-22 Oscar tonight. I could definitely see that happening, my friend. All right, Maryland versus Ohio State. The Terrapins playing really well. 20-9 record. They had that overtime loss to Nebraska, but they've mainly been getting it done. Nice, dominant win over Purdue just recently and a dominant win over Indiana recently. So do not sleep on the Terps. The main thing for the Terps is the fact that my guy that I've been banging the drum on all season long, Julian Reese, has been playing the best basketball of his career, and he's finally cleared for takeoff and ascending, or ham-sending, if you will, to a whole different level. Price has come way up now. It makes it difficult to justify maybe the 7-1 price point, but against Northwestern, which is a tough interior, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 34 fantasy points because of his 3 blocks. Against Minnesota, 21-12. Against Nebraska, 16-16. And even 10-9 against Purdue is pretty impressive. So he is starting to definitely crush. His PRA on DraftKings prop betting was like 15.5, 16.5. It's come up. I think it's 19 or 20 now. So the days of getting him at the cheap price point and getting his props at 15 to 16 are likely over. But I've been talking about him at length and how he's going to be really good next year. And we're already starting to see that this season. With him playing this way, the Terps are extremely hard to beat. Granted, they just lost to Nebraska, and their opponents haven't been that great, but they did blow the doors off of a Northwestern team that's probably going to dance. So Julian Reese at 7-1, there are worse things that could happen at that price point. It's a little high, but I definitely like him, and I think Ohio State is a complete dumpster fire at this point. So I'm on board with using Julian Reese if you want to go there. Jameer Young's price has been pretty high all season long. He has been a brute, taking a ton of shots, just contributing at a high level. His price is starting to drop a little bit after 2 straight games under 30 fantasy points. However, if this one turns into a closer affair, his number will go right back up to that 35, 36 range. It's just a little bit too much salary to absorb, I think, at this point. And I'd rather just go to Reese or probably look elsewhere entirely for this game. Last time they played back in early January, it was 80-73 for Maryland. Young did score 30 real points and pulled down 11 rebounds against Ohio State. So definitely in a 39% usage rate. So it was a big game for him. There was times where Isaac Likely, who is a great on-ball defender, was on him, and it didn't matter. Young was just in the zone there. So that shows you what his upside in this matchup actually is, but it's just a really tough price to swallow at this point in time. I think you could look down. One of our editors on FTM, Adam Young, had a nice call on Ian Martinez last game. I think that was more out of necessity because of all the payups he wanted and less out of a read. But he did play 15 minutes in the blowout, hit 3 triples, and put up 15 fantasy points. He's only 3-4. Ohio State is definitely just, like I said, lackluster in most categories. So if we think Martinez is going to play 15 or possibly even 20 minutes like he has been the last few games, he makes sense a little bit as a GPP value. We have some really solid value options for Notre Dame to where we don't have to go down there to Ian Martinez, but he's there if you want to get cute and possibly run it back if you want to follow Adam on there. I think he's watching. Good call on Martinez last time, my good sir. All right, for Ohio State, Zed Key out. We know that. They've been having to run with a starting lineup that doesn't strike fear in many. They did have a nice win over Illinois, but right now they're running Justice Suing, Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Felix Okpara as their starting 5, with the bench looking like this: Eugene Brown, Sean McNeil, and Isaac Likely. It's just been not a very good season for the Buckeyes. Bruce Thornton is really, the beginning of the season as a freshman, he was very spotty, went through his ups and downs, but it seems like something's clicked for him recently. And he's become a very reliable option for us, but also in real life basketball too. And I think the 5-6 price point on him is actually pretty interesting. Maryland's defense is definitely upper echelon when it comes to conference opponents. So I don't want to get in the habit of definitely, stacking up against Maryland or anything, but the way Thornton's been playing, it certainly makes me take note. And I want to have at least a little bit of exposure here if it continues with those heavy minutes. The main complaint that I think most of us, if not all of us, have when it comes to Ohio State is with the coaching staff, specifically Chris Holtmann, and his blatant refusal to play Bryce Sensabaugh over 30 minutes. Very high fantasy point per minute number, very high usage rate for Bryce, very high shot rate. He is a strong defensive rebounder. He has the 6th best shot rate in the country. He's drawing almost 5 fouls per 40, shooting 43% from long range. I mean, it makes very little sense why sometimes he ends up playing 24 minutes without foul trouble. There was a couple games in there where he fouled out in like under 20 minutes, so whatever. But the fact that he's playing mid-20s minutes, and especially with the team being shorthanded without Zed Key, makes very little sense. If he was afforded the opportunity to play 35 to 36 minutes, you would see Bryce put up 50-point games and break the slate all the time. The 7-9 price point is actually very underpriced for him. However, because Holtmann refuses to play him that many minutes, it's actually becomes a little bit overpriced or right on par. So it's a little bit difficult to feel good about rostering Bryce Sensabaugh, but even at the 7-9 price in like 22 minutes, he can pay off 8K. That's how good he is and how high usage he is. It's just really tough to pick. Not going to chase the Justice Suing game. I just refuse to do so. I like Justice Suing dating back to his Cal days. He has put up 29 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. So he's certainly playing well, looking like he's finally put all those injuries behind him. Back-to-back games in the double digits for rebounds, playing 32 plus minutes. So someone Holtmann, I guess, is comfortable playing over 25 minutes and has been playing extremely well. I wonder if people will chase, but he's one guy that I'm going to be backing off of because I could see some serious regression here up against this Maryland team that has the defensive chops to give him trouble. However, he did hit 8 of his 13 shots against Maryland last time and scored 30 fantasy points. So he was able to handle them on the road. If you think that continues, go ahead and roll him at 6.5. I think I'm going to stick to a little bit of exposure to Bruce Thornton and then likely we'll move on from there. Okpara, who is the natural replacement for Zed Keys, just not getting enough minutes, even at 4K, to be viable. Roddy Gale, kind of, same thing. He played 30 minutes last game, but then he could very easily play 12 this time. Just depends on Holtmann's whim. Also with Ohio State, this is their final home game of the season, so we're probably going to see a little bit of Isaac in terms of his minutes go up. Sean McNeil, we might see his minutes go up. So you have to be prepared for that to happen for some of these upperclassmen. All right, moving on to the next game here. It's DePaul versus UConn. This is one that definitely interests me to a strong degree. I'm certainly going to be looking towards the Huskies here. DePaul has been a very fantasy-friendly matchup throughout the season. The thing with Connecticut is that their rotation tends to be a little bit deeper than I'd like to see. It's starting to shore up more lately, but it's about 8-9 deep typically. We're seeing Andre Jackson, Jordan Hawkins, Tristan Newton, and then, of course, Caravan and Snogo round out the starting five with Naheem Aline, Donovan Clingan, and Joey Calcaterra off the bench. They've had a few injuries to their other depth pieces, but that's generally what we're going to see. I always bang the drum on Alex Caravan. I'm going to do so again. I love the matchup for him. He's 6'3" compared to everyone else, and Andre Jackson at 6'4" is probably going to be the play that I think most people go to here for UConn, and he is a very good option. There is foul trouble and foul risk, of course, but if he can stay on the floor like he's been doing, 30-plus fantasy points seems absolutely inevitable. He is shooting more lately, and that's a big part of his game that we sometimes see disappear. Always contributes in these secondary categories such as rebounds, assists, blocks, steal, all that good stuff. But when he's adding scoring 12 to 15 real points, that's when his upside really takes off and he becomes a fantastic overall option in all formats. He did foul out last time against DePaul in 26 minutes, and that is, like I said, sometimes an issue for him. So I don't mind eating some of that chalk on Andre Jackson if you want to go there. If you're looking for a pivot, Caravan is definitely that guy. He had major foul issues against St. John's, got a little bit excited, but if you go back to a tough Providence team that they beat the doors off of, the brakes off of, if you will, in 30 minutes, he had 16, 8, and 2 for 31.5 fantasy points. He doesn't necessarily have the big upside to be a GPP guy, so getting leverage off of Jackson, maybe it doesn't make quite as much sense, but this is a type of player that we're going to see erupt next season. We've already seen it for parts of this year. UConn has a great recruiting class coming in, and Caravan's going to be a big part of their future. He will play 30 minutes in this game, if not more, regardless of it being a late season home game where we tend to see upperclassmen play more. I think that Caravan, as long as he doesn't get into foul trouble, is looking at a 4X or better number here. Give him 30 minutes and watch him coast into a 30 fantasy point score. Real big fan of Caravan. Those of you who are new to watching me, you'll find that I have my Dubs guys, Waltz guys, whatever you want to call them. And there's certain guys that I very nearly always get exposure to each and every slate. Is he going to be a main team play for me this time? No, but I will definitely have some exposure. He is shooting 40% from long range, and does have a top 50 offensive rating. So don't hate on my man Alex Karaban. As far as Sanogo goes, I'm not huge on him at 8.7. He's been a guy that early in the season at a slightly cheaper price at times, and his rebound prop was especially nice at 5.5 and 6.5. He just wasn't paying off his number as often, even in the non-con, and he wasn't getting his prop number even. The emergence of some of these other options on the glass, like Andre Jackson, Donovan Clingan, another youngster who was swiping a bunch of rebounds early on, and Alex Karaban for that matter, it's really kind of hurt Sanogo's overall upside, and he hasn't had to do quite as much as maybe he usually did last season. He has scored 30-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5, so it's important to realize he's definitely putting up numbers. But when you're talking about an almost 9K price tag with the depth of this team, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable rolling him heavily or in a lineup that I have most of my action on. That's because we have Jordan Hawkins sitting here chucking, 18 to 20 times a night. We have every other game where Tristan Newton is taking 10-plus shots. If Jackson's offense is getting into it, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen here, a lot of mouths to feed, and Sanogo's just not the focal point that he was in the past. Still a high shot rate, still a high usage rate. If he played 30-plus minutes, definitely has to be considered because of this DePaul matchup, but they're just coming off of him a little bit more for some of these secondary options and getting guys like Donovan Clingan valuable minutes here for the March run. I think that if you are not on Jackson and you're not on Sanogo, then it makes a lot of sense to go to Jordan Hawkins because of the fact that we know he's going to take a ton of shots, but the 8.1 price point is not all that appealing to me. And Tristan Newton also, whose price at 7.3 is a little more affordable, is more better for a GPP or large field because there's no consistency with him either. He's shown some big scores, slate breaking scores, but he's also shown some mediocrity when it comes to these games. And I'm not quite sure. I don't think the UConn will come out, ill-prepared or take DePaul not seriously, but I do feel like we might see even a more spread out in terms of minutes, rotation depth, and we could see a bunch of 3.5x to slightly 4x scores from a lot of these guys. So I want to limit my exposure there to the higher priced options and try to keep that to maybe the more popular Andre Jackson or Alex Karaban. And this is a game that Donovan Clingan at 5.4. I wish they'd make him 4 or 5. Very high fantasy point per minute number, very high block rate, very high usage rate. If he can get on the floor there in the late game, if UConn ends up just dumpstering DePaul and Clingan gets the last 5 or 6 minutes of the game, not total, but that 5-minute stretch, watch him put up 20-plus fantasy points because that's how good and how fast he can score when afforded those opportunities. On the DePaul side, really, the Huskies are kind of like, Maryland and Bama in terms of their defense. I don't typically target against them very often. That takes Umoja Gibson at 8.2 off the table for me. That takes Javon Johnson over 7K off the table for me. It's mainly just a decision of Nick Ongenda or nobody. Now, Ongenda is a huge foul risk in this matchup. The previous few seasons that he's been at the collegiate level, he's been a huge fouler. And you look at since he got healthy, got, good to play those last 4 games that he's made, he's fouled out in 2 of them, and he's had 4+ fouls in 3 of the 4. So obviously on the road, it's a huge risk already. And then you come into play with Ongenda and his high foul rate, and there is a very, very likely chance that he ends up fouling out here early. His rates are phenomenal in these 4 games, 26% usage, 23% shot rate, a 30% combined rebounding rate, a 3% steal rate, a 20% block rate, which he's been blocking shots at a just an unreal level right now. 5 blocks against Marquette, 6 against Butler, 4 against Xavier, and 8 against St. John's. The fact of the matter is, even though he's been fouling out or had those high fouls, he's still putting up a huge score. 47 against Marquette, 36 against St. John's, 30 against Butler, and 27 against Xavier. But the price is all the way up there to 7.4 now. And if he gets, 25 because he fouls out in 20 minutes, then you're looking at, not a disaster, but you're probably not going to hit the top end of tournaments, and you're probably going to squeak by, depending on the rest of your lineup, in every other contest. So the way I'm approaching Ongenda is if I do my homework and start to inquire and look around on ownership and start to get that picture, and if he's going to be super high chalk, I'll probably be underweight on him. But if I see people spooked or pulling away from him, then I think I might want to be overweight on him. So I'm going to let the projected ownership there dictate where I go with Ongenda. and I don't think he's going to make my main lineup. His blocks are already a pretty high variant category, and he's going up against a front court in UConn that is really solid shot blockers and rebounders themselves. And all it's going to take is a home whistle for UConn to send Ongenda to the bench and possibly even fouling out in under 20 minutes, which he's done before. So be careful with that. All right, now we get to the Pittsburgh versus Notre Dame game, and this is probably my favorite on the slate. Pittsburgh has been good to us the last few times they've been on the slate. The Syracuse game over the weekend, we continue to get guys against Syracuse at low rostership. It's been really good. I was all over that Pittsburgh stack. Blake Hinson, especially running that high post, he did phenomenal. 36.5 fantasy points against Syracuse, 6 for 20 from the field, but 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, shot 17 threes, just absolutely chucking, capable of rebounding, taking, mid-range jumpers, a 3-level scorer through and through. Notre Dame, definitely a team that runs zone as well. Not as known for it as Syracuse, but there's going to be some similarities with how you can attack it. And we've seen guys, like Jarkel Joyner, for example. Shout out to Alex for pointing it out. He played some high post against Notre Dame prior to the Syracuse game, which got us on him against Syracuse. And he, of course, ran that spot again. And he torched them for, I believe, a triple-double, right, or close to it. So we can utilize some of the game film and stats and all that stuff from the other game there that they played against Syracuse and know that Hinson's going to definitely be a high-end play. And at 7.6, I'm pretty certain that people are just going to gloss over him, or they're just not going to have the salary for him, or they're just going to think Blake Hinson 7.6 on Pittsburgh. Because a lot of people still have it in their head that Pittsburgh is a dumpster fire of a team, which they've been for a few years under Jeff Capel, and not realize they're 21-8, crushing it in the SEC and looking at a tournament bid. So I like the fact that we're going to be getting Hinson at a likely low rostership. In the article today, I wrote up Hinson as one of my priority plays. I'm absolutely back on him. He has been playing extremely well, 29 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. Obviously, against lower tier ACC competition, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Boston College, and FSU. Virginia Tech, he got shut down, fouled out in only 25 minutes. But Notre Dame is definitely one of those teams that is on the bottom of the conference in terms of defensive prowess, and they give up an absolute ton of fantasy points to every position, but especially zone breakers such as Blake Hinson. So at 7.6, don't be afraid. Get him into your lineup. He's absolutely a great play. Nelly Cummings' price has come way up to 6.9. You'll see he scored 40 plus in back-to-back games. This isn't a chase, though. This is simply just the type of defense that Notre Dame runs, and Cummings playing so well. You may not know this if you don't pay attention to low major to mid-major teams, but Cummings comes from a Colgate program in the Patriot League where he was an absolute just killer, shot a ton of threes, great assist rate, high usage rate, an alpha. Comes to Pittsburgh where he's not quite the alpha, but starting to take that role, and his assist rate for Pitt in conference games has just gone crazy. He's actually got a career high assist rate right now this season at 29.2%, which is 82nd in the country, but he has the 6th best assist rate in 18 ACC games at 30%. So he has, had his hand on just about every score that Pittsburgh makes, whether he's actually scoring it himself or he's dropping the dime on it. Taking a ton of shots there. He's been efficient, and he is a very good play at 6.9, but he's another price that's going to spook people and scare them away. And we're going to get him at very low ownership because of it. Will I suggest stacking Pittsburgh? Maybe not. Will I be stacking Pittsburgh? Probably. I tend to do a little bit more risky things than others, but it worked out for us against the last zone defense they played against. No reason to think that it won't work out against another zone defense. So Cummings and Hinson are my 2 favorites. Jamarius Burton at 7.8 is more of a luxury play, I'd say. He also crushed that zone to the tune of 14, 9, and 8, almost a triple-double. He should definitely do some damage here against Notre Dame. He's not quite the 3-point shooter or volume 3-point shooter as Cummings and Hinson have been, but he's still able to put up a high fantasy point per minute number when things are clicking. But he's definitely behind those 2 for me in the priority list. I'm not on the other Pitt guys, but I do think Federico, yes, that is the name, at 6K is an intriguing GPP play. His frame definitely going to give trouble to the Notre Dame front court that doesn't have the size, toughness, aggressiveness to check him. He is definitely a high fouler, so on the road that would concern me. But if he's able to stay on the floor for 25 to 27 minutes, I think he probably hits 24 plus fantasy points in this matchup as well. And then I want to throw out there Guillermo Diaz-Graham. If his minutes trend upward like they had been prior to Georgia Tech, he's an actually really sneaky tournament play here at 3.8K. Doomed me against Georgia Tech because the minutes were gone, but then he bounced back against Syracuse and played 13 minutes, and you see he put up 15 fantasy points. So has a high fantasy point per minute number, going to be a big staple on this team going forward or next season. And he's out of the brothers, he's definitely the one that I think is going to flourish the most. I think he's an intriguing, value GPP dart, I suppose. But he won't be making my main lineup, so don't get that twisted. But just want to throw the name Guillermo Diaz-Graham out at you in case you do see him hit a 15-plus fantasy point number. You won't be super shocked about it. But Hinson-Cummings duo, certainly a power move against this Notre Dame team. On the Notre Dame side, and this may turn into a semi-game stack for me with Notre Dame having two very good values. We know J.J. Starling is out. He is already confirmed, so we don't have to worry about that. Marcus Hammond, who missed last game dealing with a toe issue, sounds like he's trending doubtful. So this already short Notre Dame rotation is looking to be even smaller, even more shallow. What they ran against Wake Forest was the following. Dane Goodwin, 40 minutes. Trey Wirtz, 38 minutes. Cormac Ryan, 36. Nate Laszewski, 35. Van Allen Lubin, 33. And then Matt Zona came off the bench to give out water breaks for 16 whole minutes. They played Robbie Carmody a total of 3. And they were out there just to give fouls. And that's what they did. They combined for 6. So the starters are all going to play an extraordinarily high amount of minutes here in this game. Dane Goodwin, Cormac Ryan, and Nate Laszewski are all fine. I wrote it just this way in the article too. They're all in play because of the fact that they're going to be on the court for so long. But they are the higher priced options, and they're not quite as intriguing to me. Like Nate Laszewski at 7.7 is okay. Cormac Ryan at 6.7 is okay. I think Dane Goodwin's a little bit more than okay at 6.4, but you'll look at what he's been doing lately, playing a lot more passive when it comes to shooting the basketball. And when he has shot, he hasn't made all that many shots. Outside of the Duke game, he's been pretty well under 40% shooting. So I think all three of those guys, if you wanted to argue for them, that's fine. But we're not going to be playing 3 Notre Dame guys in our lineup, regardless of them running a 6-man rotation. That just seems pretty suboptimal. Where I want to go here is clearly Trey Wirtz at 4.8 has to be considered probably one of the best, if not the best point per dollar play on the slate there. His price has come up slightly, but still under 5K, playing well over 30 minutes, especially if Hammond can't go. Wirtz just makes way too much sense. Over the last 2 games, he's played 34 plus minutes. He's taken 24 total shots in those 2 games, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 25 points among those 2, and back-to-back games over 22 fantasy points. So Wirtz, who has had his ups and downs throughout his career, is a great value play. And he's typically been, and I know this, if you're new, this is not as if I think it's a metric for prediction or anything, but whenever he's been chalk value, he has typically detonated the slate or broken value. So that is something that we see from him a lot. The other option, Van Allen Lubin, I'm considering and probably going to run him right next to where it's in my main lineup. 4.5K, a little bit risky at times. However, if he's going to play these high minutes, then the risk is basically gone. He played 33 against Wake, took 13 shots, 19 points, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks. He's been a pretty solid option when he's been given these minutes. And you'll see before the Virginia game, which, Virginia is Virginia, you can throw that out. Before that, he had a rock solid 23 against Duke, 18 against Virginia Tech, 20 against Georgia Tech, 23 against Georgia Tech, 20 against NC State, like a pretty solid performer when it comes to, getting these 18 to 20 minutes at minimum, and then you give him more, he's becoming an even better option. So I would definitely recommend in your high dollar single entry, that type of thing, running both, because I think they're both going to put up 20 plus fantasy points here in this matchup against Pittsburgh. And it's not as if they're super highly efficient or, these great players necessarily. It's just the fact that they're so cheap and they're going to be on the floor for an extremely long time. And even if there's foul trouble to be had for one of them, they don't really have the bodies to do anything about it. Matt Zona playing more than 15 minutes just isn't going to work out too well. And Coach Bray is moving on from Notre Dame at season's end. So I think at this point, he's just running the starters into the ground, which I can appreciate. All right, moving on to the next game. Alex mentions that Georgia Tech went for 90+ against Syracuse. Yeah, Syracuse defense is like historically bad. I think it's one of the worst Boeheim defenses that we've seen. It's only a matter of time before he hangs it up. But we get one more game. Well, we'll get a couple more, but one more regular season game with Syracuse on the slate, which will be Saturday against Wake Forest. So we'll be stacking up Wake Forest. I don't know what the rest of the industry will do, but if you pay attention to the show that day on Friday night, we'll be talking about Wake Forest a lot. All right, moving on here. We have a couple more games, and then we'll head out. Oklahoma versus Kansas State. I'm at the point with Joe Bamasiel. Stop. Don't heavy sigh at me just yet. I'm at the point with Joe Bamasiel where he's not touching my main lineup. So, I'm going to meetings for that. But at 3-8, he's still in play somewhere, somehow, some way in one of your contests, please. I know he only played 9 minutes against Iowa State, but before that, trending towards this 20-minute roll, taking a bunch of shots. I mean, he's just too good not to be playing. This is a guy at George Washington that just put up 30 bangers each and every night. Kansas State tends to be a pretty fantasy-friendly matchup. It's just a matter of how many minutes he's going to get. And Oklahoma has a trio of cheap guards that they've been using between Bamasiel, Milos Uzan, whose minutes are secured at least for him, upside maybe not the super highest, and then Otega Awi, who has a high usage rate, but his minutes are typically split with Bamasiel. And lately, Otega's completely fallen off the map because he's playing 17 to 20 minutes, but his fantasy point per minute number has just gone south, fully south for the winter. So what we're doing with these Oklahoma guys, it's a little bit tough because I think it's getting reckless to keep using their value plays. Even though this matchup is nice, I think if anything, Uzan at 4-8 because he's going to be on the floor playing heavy minutes. So I'm fine with him. I think Tanner Groves at 6'4" makes a little bit of sense because he's so cheap at 6'4". He does have the rates to back up being a strong play, 27.3% defensive rebounding rate, which is top 20. 4.5% block rate. He's shooting 32% from long range. So another one of those guys that can, mix it up down low, but also step out and hit a three if you're too slow. 21% shot rate. So I don't hate the idea of using Tanner Groves there at 6'4". He's typically been a relatively safe option. He did put up 16 and 6 against K-State last time they played, which was just 2 weeks ago. So I definitely could advocate using him. He's been a little bit worse on the road, and there's always that risk of a bad whistle, but at least the price is certainly right for him when it comes to Tanner Groves. Grant Sherfield has, just become – he went from a GBB only play at Wichita to an every slate bank, throw him into every lineup possible at Nevada to, wow, he's going to Oklahoma. He's going to play a lot of minutes. Let's use him all the time. And now he's never being used to, wow, his price is just, he's too cheap. He should be $8K. This is Grant Sherfield. And still not paying off this $7K price tag all that much. However, against K-State last time, and you'll have to look around because he's been pretty mediocre or downright bad over the last 2 weeks against teams like Kansas, Iowa State, Texas Tech. These are tougher defenses. But against K-State, a team that yields a lot of fantasy goodness, even though they're winning games, they close games, which is nice, but they do give up a lot of points. Sherfield broke out 37 minutes, 7 for 15, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 43.5 fantasy points. So you have to love Grant Sherfield for large field GPPs because people just won't be looking in his direction. But this matchup is obviously a gold mine when it comes to guards and players such as Grant Sherfield. So I'm on board with using him. I'm on board with using Tanner Groves, and I'm on board with using Milos Uzan. But as far as main team goes, I think I'm kind of off of Oklahoma, and that makes me a little nervous because of how great K-State games have been. But I do want to shift over and get my exposure to K-State, and I'm probably going to try and get quite a bit. Even though Porter Moser has a defense that is not targetable very often, they will contain other teams' best options, but we're at the end of the year here. We're talking about a Kansas State team that has exceeded all expectations, 22-7. Jerome Tang's done a fantastic job. They have had 3 straight wins over Iowa State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. And this is the final home game of the regular season. Look for them to have a little bit of extra pep in their step before they finish their season this weekend on the road against West Virginia. In the loss to Oklahoma last time, and Kansas State's been much worse on the road, they lost by 14. Key Johnson had 14-4. Marquise Noel had 14, 5, and 6. 3 steals, still a good game for him. Nate Tomlin had 17 and 10, and everybody else was pretty much a non-factor. Starts off with Marquise Noel. He's 9.5, so a high price, but tends to be a matchup-proof player. He has really good rates, 27% usage, 24% shot rate, 41% assist rate, which is the 3rd best in the country, 3.5% steal rate, shooting about 35% from long range. He took some time when he transferred from Little Rock last year to get acclimated with P5 basketball. But once he did, it became a situation where, wow, this kid is absolutely amazing. So only 5'8", under 170. He's a tiny player from Harlem, but he is a magnificent player. And one of the guys in this 9K, 9.5 range that I'm happy to use even against Oklahoma, and I will have my fair share of Noel. I did highlight him in the article as one of the players that I am looking to, even in that bad spot where they did, kind of struggle against Oklahoma. He still put up almost 35 fantasy points. So at 9.5, we're looking at a floor of about 32 to 35. He's been actually one of the few guys on the team a little better on the road, but he's going to want to go out here with a bang. Last home game for K-State, look for him to play, 39 to 40 minutes the entire game, take a ton of shots, and contribute in a multitude of ways. High turnover rate, but on DK, that doesn't matter as much. So he has the assist to kind of cancel that out. I'm looking for a big game from Marquise Noel, somewhere between 40 and 45 fantasy points. That's how good I feel about him. Key Johnson was a load. He's a lot tougher than the Oklahoma front court. He's been fairly, not mediocre, that's the wrong word to use, but and not subpar or anything, but he hasn't been hitting his upside that he showed us earlier in the season, or perhaps the beginning of conference play when he was churning out 35 to 40 fantasy points with regularity. And that was against teams such as Kansas, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, like tougher teams, right? So I think at 8.3, the price definitely baits you in a little bit, but I am slightly worried about him in this spot just because I don't know that he'll have the upside to really matter too much in tournaments. But if it's a safe floor that you're looking for, you definitely can get that 4X number from him at 8.3 here. Regardless. And then we have, I know Nate Tomlin did well last time, but at 6'3", he's not really a play. I don't think for me, he's just not the focal point. He's, 3rd, 4th, 5th in the pecking order on any given day. And the minutes have taken a downturn because of his higher foul rate. So I would rather, if I'm looking to Wildcats players that aren't named Marquise Noel or Key Johnson, then I want to look to some of their cheapies, such as Desi Sills, Cam Carter, or David Ngesson. Cam Carter is not going to move the needle very often, but he does play quite a bit of minutes for K-State typically. So it's somebody at 4.2 that you're going to get at least on the floor. Desi Sills with can turn into a volume-based scorer. 5K might feel a little high for him, but again, he's going to be on the floor playing 30-plus minutes. And then David Ngesson, who, finally playing games healthy, has played 20-plus minutes in back-to-back games. They've been using him a lot more. I think that trend continues at 4K, playing 20 minutes against Oklahoma. Definitely capable of paying that off. His rates as far as usage and shots aren't great, but he does have a 22% combined rebounding rate, 10% of which is on the offensive side of the ball, a 3.5% block rate, and he does shoot 57% from long range. Granted, he's only attempted 7, but that's enough to make defenses second guess leaving him open if he steps out there. So I like the fact that his minutes are trending in the right direction at 4K. He seems like a pretty solid value option if we want to go that way. Moving on to Georgetown versus Creighton. My spiel that I always say for Creighton whenever on their slate is that the prices are, I have like a whole recording, the prices are correct. They're, going to hit 3.5 to 4x. There's not a lot of upside, blah, 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 blah. Today, I feel differently. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they're playing the Hoyas. Anytime you have a team playing the Hoyas, you can automatically give them another, 1x to 2x on their value return. But the prices, aside from maybe Nemhart, who it wasn't that high on last time. I know Razzle, when he was on, was. But outside of Nemhart, I think the prices are a little low for this matchup on everybody. And for me, the priority starts with Arthur Kaluma, who was a highlighted play in today's article. I like Arthur Kaluma a lot. He's one of my favorite players on Creighton in terms of his ability, talent, real-life basketball. But he also is a very sneaky and oftentimes overlooked fantasy asset in the DFS and prop betting markets. Villanova, front court wise, they are definitely susceptible to giving up big games to front court players. He had a nice one against them in 29 minutes, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists for 34.5 fantasy points. Prior to that, he had a rough one against Marquette, 30 against St. John's, 22 against Providence. He's just going to be on the floor a long time because Creighton typically does not go deep into their bench. This is another team that is really easy to predict where the minutes are going to come from. The production might fluctuate from time to time, but we typically know their starting five is going to be on the floor for 30-plus minutes. They're going to use a little bit of Mason Miller, a little bit of Farabello, maybe some Sharif Mitchell for water breaks, but typically we're going to see that starting five play a lot. So Kaluma with 30-plus minutes against Georgetown is an excellent play. He has better than you expect rates. 24% usage rate is actually the highest on the team. 23% shot rate is the highest on the team. He has a combined rebounding rate over 25%, a block rate of 2%, a steal rate over 1%, and he's shooting about 32% from long range on 107 attempts. So again, somebody who's adequate enough to drag his defender out, but also can get down and grab rebounds and score with some post moves. Really big fan of Arthur Kaluma. I think this is a fantastic spot. I think Creighton will be a popular team just because they're facing against Georgetown, but I think we're looking at probably guys going to, Ryan Kalkbrenner, for example. That price for him is pretty cheap. Trey Alexander, who I'm going to talk about in a second, and maybe even Baylor Shireman, who's just, kind of quietly at times puts up big fantasy scores. So Kaluma is my guy. Last time they played Georgetown, it was not a great game. It was 63-53 in favor of Creighton. They kind of took their foot off the gas there. Shireman had 10 points, 11 rebounds. Kalkbrenner 16 and 8 with 2 blocks. Kaluma had 12 and 8. Trey Alexander 11, 5 and 5. Ryan Nemhart 14, 5 and 2. So fairly okay games. I think we see them play a lot better. I think, this late in the season, we're going to see guys playing a lot with a lot more swagger, especially if they've been hot lately. But Kaluma is a guy that I think against Georgetown is just a big major matchup problem. So that's my boy there. I think Trey Alexander at 6'6" will be semi-popular. He has fairly solid overall rates as well. And this is anytime he's under 7K. It's at least in consideration. Shooting 41% from long range, 21% shot rate. Another guy that typically goes overlooked. It seems like him and Kaluma go overlooked, but I do think with these two on the slate here in a great matchup that the industry is going to lean a little bit heavier towards Trey Alexander, just because if you look at his logs quickly, you might get it in your head that he has a safer floor. And that's not necessarily the case. He does take a high number of shots, though, which typically gives him a higher floor because he's going to have the ball in his hands a little bit more than Kaluma, just because he's looking to create on offense. So I don't mind him. I think Nemhart, like I said, is the fifth option for me. I'm typically underweight on him. If he was just a tick cheaper, like 6'8", 6'9", I may want some more. I know it's not a huge difference, but every dollar counts here when we're trying to, finagle our lineups. I like Ryan Kalkbrenner at 8-1. The upside's been missing, and we've seen that on Creighton a lot. Like the upside's just not quite there because they do share the ball a lot between those 5 starters, and you're typically seeing all of them hit about a 3.5x number. It's rare for one of them to completely break out while the rest, have mediocre games. It's just a lot of shared basketball, which makes it a little bit tougher at some of the higher prices to pay. But I think Kalkbrenner here now at 8-1, which is one of the lower prices he's been in quite some time, makes a lot of sense. He did have 32 against Georgetown before. Hitting 32 to 33 here is not the end of the world. I just wonder if he has 40 in him at this stage with the way Creighton's playing. If ever there was a time to do it, it would be here against Georgetown, obviously. And then the transfer, Baylor Shireman, he's been pretty good. A really high-end rebounder, over 8.5 rebounds per game. Had that 32 against Georgetown last time. His scoring has taken a bit of a hit, but still contributing in other categories. Has a 24% defensive rebounding rate, which is top 70 in the country. Fourth best defensive rebounding rate in the Big East. So all of those guys in the starting lineup certainly in play here against a very bad Hoyas team. Georgetown-wise, second here. Okay. Georgetown-wise, it's not great. There is some possible injury news or news to track. Qudus Wahab with a questionable tag. If he were to sit out, it does open up some minutes for others. Look at the Georgetown box from their Providence game in which they got dumpster. They rolled with their usual Primo Spears, Jay Heath, Brandon Murray, a cook, but Bradley Izuwiro with Wahab out played 21 minutes there, and then Bryson Mazzone off the bench for 15. Primo Spears had a nice game, 26 and 4 assists. And Jay Heath had 19, but Brandon Murray got shut down in their front court. Pretty much got shut down as well. Now, Creighton isn't a team that I shy away from targeting against. I think they, while their defense is good, I think guys can definitely score fantasy points against them. Brandon Murray is probably the most intriguing, sitting there at 7-3 when it comes to tournament plays. Transferring over from LSU, he's been a big-time contributor, him and Primo Spears. Murray has a usage rate of 25%, shooting 32% from long range, 20% assist rate. I do like what he offers in this particular matchup and would not be shocked to see him have a pretty sizable effort somewhere in the area of 30 to 35 fantasy points as Creighton, kind of probably hones in and tries to contain Primo Spears. So he's the guy that I would be looking at here. I don't have a ton of interest in going to, even though he's only 3.7, Bradley Izuwiro, depending on that Wahab news. He did have a solid 19 fantasy points in 21 minutes. So, there is, assuming he plays 20 minutes again, some upside there at 3.7, but there is also a lot of downside, and we don't have to make a questionable play like this. As my dear friend from Maryland would tell me, from Clow, he would say, play good players, Walt. And he's right. You should play good players. Bradley Izuwiro may turn into a good player at one point, but I don't know if we can categorize him as that just yet. All right, moving on to another game that I am very interested in and want a ton of exposure. And my lineup may just turn into a game stack of this LSU Missouri game and Pittsburgh Notre Dame. Like, that's how involved with both I'm actually going to be. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to do so. And I've had a lot of success through the years game stacking in college basketball. I know a lot of people don't like to do it, but it does work quite a bit. Starting with the LSU side, this is a phenomenal matchup, DVP spot, whatever you want to call it, for KJ Williams. I know he's 8.6K, but he is one of those payups that I was referring to over the 8.5 range that is at the top of my priority list at the beginning of the show. Marquise Noel, one of my favorite, 9K guys, but if I can't get there for 1K, just about 1K less, I can go to KJ Williams and perhaps have the same floor/upside combination here. Going up against a Missouri front court that has been bleeding fantasy points all season long. As improved and as good as this Missouri team has been, and how I believe they will win this game because LSU has been kind of, pretty bad. I think KJ Williams is going to go off, and this is the last home game, I believe. Let me just double check that, for LSU for the regular season. So this is, So this is the shot for, even though KJ Williams, a transfer from Murray, his only season at LSU, but a chance for him to go out with a bang. He is absolutely a fantastic upper echelon top play in all formats. In fact, in the 3-man core in the article, I do have him as one of those 3-man core members. Going to play 35 minutes, if not more. They'll have him out there a lot. Last time against Missouri on the road, he played 33 minutes. He had 15 points, 11 rebounds, on his way to 36.25 fantasy points. Now he's at home. I'm expecting something even bigger. The last 2 games against favorable matchups, Vanderbilt has Liam Robbins, so I know what he can do damage-wise on the defensive end, but he did have 53 against Vanderbilt, 35 and 10. That's kind of when I was looking at Oscar a little bit earlier. And then against Ole Miss with the undersized front court, 29 and 5 on his way to 37, almost 38 fantasy points. He has taken, get ready for this, 43 shots in his past 2 games. Expect him to shoot 20-plus times tonight against Missouri. As long as he doesn't get into some kind of foul trouble, which I'm less worried about on the home floor, he's going to be one of the top scorers on the slate, top 3 at minimum. Very confident in KJ Williams tonight. Absolutely one of easily my favorite pay up of the slate. I'm not interested in the mid-range guys such as Derek Fountain, Adam Miller, but I do like the idea of using some of their values in GPP, and that could be Jalen Reed, that could be Tyrell Ward, could be Justice Hill, or even Trey Hannibal. Now, lately it's been Tyrell Ward, who had been starting games, sitting there at 3.8, played 25 minutes against Ole Miss. He did hit just about 13-14, so not the greatest score, but adequate enough for this price point of 3.8. He had 15 against Vandy. You go back against a tougher opponent in Texas A&M, he had 23 fantasy points. I think if he gets the minutes, he makes a lot of sense, but I'm not so sure he will, depending on how this last home game goes. They do have some upperclassmen that will probably play over him, so be advised about that. And then Jalen Reed sitting there at 3.3. He saw 21 minutes against Ole Miss. Got hot for a minute there, but then ended up with 9.5 fantasy points. Typically going to be between 9 and 12 at near min price. That also won't kill you. So I do have interest in Ward and Reed for salary savings throughout my various, MME stuff. But KJ Williams is a main team play. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind about what I think he will do. Get him in your lineups. On the Missouri side, Kobe Brown, 9K. If it's between him and KJ, I am leaning KJ, even though Kobe Brown hung 51 on LSU last time. He's got that in his bag and very well could hit 40 plus here. It's just a big price to pay. I would like to get some Missouri exposure. I mentioned I may turn into a mini game stack here, but I think I want to look more towards Demoy Hodge, who gives me a little bit more savings down to 7.5K. Has been a really strong stat sheet stuffer in terms of we know we can rely on him to give us peripheral stats, but he's added that scoring. And at Cleveland State, he came here with Gates. Coach Gates, he was a big-time scorer throughout, especially in the late season. He was the guy that they could rely on in the conference tournaments and late season, and I think that's going to turn into what we see happen here. 3 of his last 5, he scored 14 real points. The game against Georgia, 18, 2, a block and a steal. Game against Mississippi State, 16, 4-2, 3 blocks, 3 steals. He's just able to rack up those blocks and steals at such a high clip that it makes his upside very, very high if he adds scoring to the equation. 7.5 may feel like a higher price initially, but it's definitely not in a matchup such as this when I expect him to play big minutes, and especially when Isaiah Mosley has just not been around. He's not playing, and I don't expect him to come back this season. So that's a lot of usage that Hodge has been able to swoop up and make his own. He does have a 25% shot rate. He's shooting 40% from long range. He has a 5.1% steal rate, which is 8th best in the country, and a 2.6% block rate. His steal rate in conference play is right around 5% as well, which is, of course, the best mark in the SEC. And he's inadequate / above average 3-point shooter, 14th best in the SEC there. So I like Demoy Hodge. If you need the savings from Brown, I have no issue with that. In fact, that's kind of the direction I'm even leaning. Value-wise for Missouri, Mo Diarra has been giving them some really solid minutes. He is a fouler. That's especially going to be the case on the road, but they're looking to him more often. He's got a lot of toughness, and he's just doing the dirty work and happens to get rebounds and blocks. And if he scores a couple putbacks here or there, it's great. 4.9's a little higher than I want to pay, but he's definitely an option. And then you have Trey Gomillion, who just came back after when he missed a game or two with a groin injury. He had 27 against Mississippi State, 17 against Georgia. Look for him to play 25 or more minutes tonight because of the fact that he's an upperclassman and there's not many games left for him. We saw him play more last game, and I think that we're going to see the Mississippi game coming up, him play a lot, but it sounds like from what I've looked at on message boards and Coach Gates' presser that he did, Trey Gomillion is going to be a guy that they're going to look to a lot more these last two games and into the conference tournament. So at this mere price of 3.8K, we may see a healthy amount of minutes for him. And he is another one of Coach Gates' guys that came over for him from Cleveland State. And I think that he makes a lot of sense if you can't afford one of the higher priced Missouri guys, getting yourself exposure to a game like this that's going to be pretty good for fantasy purposes. So I'm on board with him. And I still think Sean East is worth a shot at 4.7. I know he hasn't played well, but his price keeps tumbling down. He had that 30 spot against Tennessee. He can get hot. And if he catches fire, Gates will be inclined to play him more minutes. And at 4.7 and relatively low ownership, you may have yourself a GPP winner here if things work out right and he hits that 25 to 27 minute mark. So Sean East is not to be slept on either. All right, moving on, we have Clow. Yes, sir. Got you, Clow. Gotcha. All right, next game, Penn State versus Northwestern. This has the look of a physical contest. Penn State's front court's been they're a little undersized. You can definitely push them around, but it's not as if Northwestern has the front court to take advantage of it. So I'm not that worried or excited about the DVP we normally get against Penn State. Matthew Nicholson at 4.7 would be the guy to target here from Northwestern and the one most likely to take advantage of that DVP. He did play 23 minutes last time out against Maryland, Clow's Maryland at that, 17 and a half fantasy points, 10-5. He has been right around 15 fantasy points in 3 straight. So at 4.7, we're not being killed by 15 to 18 fantasy points. He just needs to be able to stay on the floor. And I think we can project him safely for about 20 to 22 minutes. So I don't mind him whatsoever. The price on Boo Buie at 8.6 is extremely uncomfortable for me personally. The 7-1 price for Chase Audige is much more agreeable to the type of lineup that I want to build. Chase has been way less productive lately. We haven't seen him hitting that upside, which was led to the steep price decline. Nice little buy low spot for him. And I think that Boo Buie, who has been playing a lot better, even though he struggled mightily against Maryland, I think it's more of a sell on Boo Buie and a buy on Chase Audige. So that's where I'm at with my exposure to Northwestern. I don't really care about rostering Ty Berry at 5'8", although he could get hot, or Brooks Barnheiser, Robbie Barron. Those guys I think are all pretty low-end plays. It's mainly just, if you want to target the DVP spot, you go to Nicholson, or if you want one of those two Northwestern guards, take the discount with Chase Audige and hope that he starts to hit his ceiling once more. Penn State, Jalen Pickett has been phenomenal, flirting with a triple-double all the time. He's for him having down games, quote unquote, but he's still putting up 30 plus against teams like Rutgers and Maryland and some of these defenses that are tough. So at 10.3, you know what you're getting here. He's dropped from 11.1. At this point, when he has a price drop closer to 10K than 11K, you really want to consider him because he's going to be on the floor for the entire game, and he has this ornate ability to put up fantasy points in bunches, and he has been absolutely phenomenal for this Penn State team. This another player that really, he was with Siena for a few years, transferred over last year. We saw him kind of sleepwalk a bit, and he played a lot of minutes, but he wasn't anywhere near the level of what he was at Siena for a long while. And then this season, he completely ham-sends to what he is here. 8th on the Ken Palm Player of the Year rankings. He has the 5th best usage rate in the Big Ten, 11th best shot rate, 2nd best offensive rating, playing the most minutes percentage-wise, 8th best defensive rebounding rate, and the best assist rate in the conference, the 2nd best assist rate in the country. He's also shooting 46% from long range in conference games. That is a career high. Just really amazing season for him, and I think that he's another one of those guys that, it's a luxury play, certainly. Don't have to prioritize him by any means. Northwestern's defense is certainly worth respecting, but at this point, you have to consider a player with these rates, this caliber of talent, and a floor of 32, a very strong option, and you have to have him in your player pool to a degree. That is for sure. Other guys on Penn State, I think Seth Lundy's priced out. If you want to chase Cam Winter, who's sitting there at 4.8, you can. He's been playing pretty well lately. 3 straight games over 27 fantasy points, and that was one against Rutgers, which is a tougher D. But he's very capable of dudding out and putting up a 5. There was some early foul trouble in the game or two for Pickett, which allowed Winter to really step up in the first half and take over some of these games. So he's a little bit at the mercy of what Pickett's going to do with his foul trouble lately and if his shot's not falling. So tread carefully if you're going to go with Winter. Nobody else on Penn State really worth using at this moment in time. So moving on, we have our last game on the slate, and then we'll wrap up. Texas versus TCU. Now, in the Discord over the weekend, even before Lampkin was ruled out, I had mentioned, this price of 5.8 for Jacoby Coles, it's a little high, sure, but man, he looks awesome, and he has been pretty solid. As far as his fantasy point per minute number goes, it's near the top in the conference. He has a very solid usage rate, shot rate. Pull that stuff up for you. With Lampkin out, they did start Xavier Cork, which maybe threw some people off, but at that point, it was a no-brainer for me to put Coles in because theoretically we knew he'd get more minutes, and he did pan out. 27 minutes against Texas Tech off the bench, 15, 5, and 3, almost 30 fantasy points. I am a really big fan of Coles and think that he offers a lot for now and in the future. Has a top 100 offensive rating, 26.4% shot rate, which is the highest on the team, 23% usage rate, a 29% combined rebounding rate, 4% block rate, shooting 34% from long range. He does a little bit of everything. Former Butler transfer. So if his minutes spike up to 25 to 28, he's an absolute elite play at 5.5. His price actually has gone down after being up of 6K just a week or two ago. If he plays 17 minutes, he's still a very strong play because of his high fantasy point per minute number. If he drops to like 12 to 13, he's still in play because you see he's putting up 18 to 19 points in that type of time frame. Now, obviously, if he drops to 12 minutes, he's not going to pay off most likely, but he's also not going to torpedo your lineup. So you have some safety here, and that doesn't matter to me as much if Lampkin plays or not. I think at this point, if Lampkin does play, he's going to be relatively limited. And the way Jacoby Coles is playing, it would just not make sense not to use him. And that Texas front court has some guys in it that can take over games. They're less consistent, but there's name value there with Dylan Disu, Christian Bishop, Timmy Allen. There's some guys on this Texas front court that have to be checked. And at least if Texas comes out firing and hot and there's some offense that needs to be had, Jacoby Coles is somebody who can give them an offensive lift there off the bench. And I like them using him in that role instead of plugging him in as a starter with Lampkin out as kind of a guy to step off the bench and punch him in the mouth there on that second unit. So I'm a big Coles guy. At this moment in time, I do plan on using him against Texas here. I'm fully on board. We'll see what happens with Lampkin. But like I said, even if Lampkin plays, I still like what I see from Coles and will still be using him in a fair amount of lineups. I think Mike Miles is still probably on the cheap side, under 8K. I know the upside hasn't quite been there the last couple of games since he's gotten healthy, but high usage rate, high shot rate. He's taken 16 shots in the last game, 14 in the game prior to that. It's only a matter of time before he has one of his breakout games. The emergence this year of Damian Bowe has really taken away some of that upside, but that backcourt together is a really strong unit. I do like Mike Miles quite a bit for GPP purposes just because he does have slate breaking upside that he hasn't shown lately, and people with the short memories sometimes forget things, maybe not remember just how good Mike Miles actually is. So do not get caught sleeping when it comes to a player of his caliber. And Emmanuel Miller at 6'7" at least is in the conversation, but I like Coles better. Texas side, how about the Vanderbilt version of Dylan Disu coming out to play for the first time in, a long time. 24, 4, and 2 against Baylor, 10 for 15 from the field, even knocked down 3 triples for good measure. I don't know where that came from, but good to see it sitting there at 5K. I don't necessarily want to advocate for chasing that performance with Dylan Disu because minutes are all over the place for him. Foul rate is high as ever when it comes to Dylan Disu. And we know that the Texas front court players have been a tilt fest throughout the season. Whether that's Christian Bishop coming on, use Disu, Christian Bishop comes in and goes off. Use Timmy Allen, Brock Cunningham goes off. We finally get to Brock Cunningham at the value, and then Disu goes nuts. We also have seen the youngster Dylan Mitchell have his fair share of good games, even though lately, the last part of the season here, he's lost his minutes and not playing as well. He's only 3-3. You can't even write him off if you're multi-entering because he very easily could be somebody that plays 20-plus minutes here if he starts out really well. So the front court is definitely not something that I want to target super heavily in my main lineup, but it was good to see Dylan Disu play that well like he did against Baylor. He's definitely on my radar, especially if he can play over 25 minutes, which might be a big ask because road fouls are definitely something that scare me at the collegiate level. I still think Brock Cunningham is fine as a value. 4-4. It's a little bit higher for him, but I look for his minutes to probably push closer to 20 again. It was just the Disu show, but we've seen Cunningham play pretty well in this reserve role of getting 18 to 20 minutes. So I still like him as a value. I still like Tyrese Hunter as a value. His price has come up, but not enough. He's still under 5K. We've seen him play 30-plus minutes in back-to-back games and scored 22-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. Is Tyrese Hunter turning a corner? Is he the Iowa State Tyrese Hunter once more? I don't know. It's only been 2 games, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. This matchup against TCU is definitely nothing to be super afraid of, and I think he can continue to perform here. His three-point shot has been fantastic over the last 2 games. He's contributing in multiple categories again. He's doing more than just standing around. This version of Tyrese Hunter makes Texas very, very scary. So at 4-9, giving him 32 minutes, he is absolutely a fantastic play in all formats. Don't be too mad if he ends up blanking and giving you a 10. But at this point in time, I am trusting Tyrese Hunter, and he is really close to being in my main lineup. So that is the slate. We did it. Woo! Let me see here. Champagne Poppy Bitcoin. Are all these player props? I can give you some player props. I'm actually talking about the DFS side of things, but I can definitely give you some player props here in a moment. Let me give you my 3-man core first. So this is the 3 players that will be in my main lineup or who I feel is a good group to build around. That starts with KJ Williams. Already talked about him at length. Going up against Missouri, look for him in his swan song at home to put up a 35-plus fantasy point game at minimum. I like him for 40 today. That's what I'm looking and expecting out of my man KJ Williams. Second core play, I'm going to be boring here, but the popular Notre Dame values. It's kind of a core 1A, core 1B, but Trey Wirtz and Van Allen Lubin, they just allow us at sub 5K to really free up a lot of salary and do what we need to do. I'm going to fall in line and play those 2 regardless of how popular I think they will be. And for your information, I think they'll be quite popular. Third member of the core, and maybe I should give the posh play of the day here because I do see some new people who don't normally watch me because of my night owl status. Posh play of the day basically means my version of the sneak. I do have a Posh Alexander shirt jersey behind me in case you were wondering for St. John's. He has been my dude for many years now, and it basically comes about because he was priced so low at like 5.5 and 6K, and I was the only one rostering him, and he was blowing up the slate for 30, 35-point fantasy point games, and it turned into a thing, and here we are. I'm very protective of my Posh Play of the Day status. My last Posh Play of the Day yesterday was Terry Roberts. Didn't work at all because of foul trouble, which was inexplicable, but typically we have had a very high success rate with players dubbed as the Posh Play of the Day. So I do not take this title lightly. I do not give it out every slate because I'm very protective of my record. I am going to list the third member of my core and the Posh Play of the Day as Blake Hinson, aka the zone defense killer at 7.6. It's a high enough price to scare people away. It's right in the wheelhouse of typical Posh plays. I'm looking for sub 15% ownership on our guy Blake Hinson, and I'm looking for him to put up a 20-point, 12 rebound type of game at minimum, with the upside for much, much more, especially if he's jacking up 10 plus triples, which I expect him to do. Blake Hinson, Posh play of the day, lock it in, enjoy your green screens. I am very happy, and you should be too. All right, let's get into PrizePicks and help some folks out here that are talking about the prop market. Nice thing about this being a daytime, we can run a little bit longer, and I don't have to worry about losing any of you or falling asleep at the wheel sometimes like I do. All right, so PrizePicks, there's a couple. Let me pull up my FTN daily piece because I have a couple that we'll want to talk about. Good to see you, by the way, Clow. You not usually stay up late with me anymore, and it makes me sad. But I'm happy now. All right, so here's the PrizePicks plays that I like best. Go figure, Blake Hinson. Over 21.5 PRA and over 26.5 fantasy points on Blake Hinson. I'm also a fan of his teammate, Nelly Cummings, over 20.5 PRA. Demoy Hodge of Missouri, over 18.5 PRA. KJ Williams, are you sensing the theme here? KJ Williams, over 33.1 fantasy points. These happen to be the guys I'm high on in fantasy and DFS. Very weird. And then Tyrese Hunter, over 15.5 PRA. Yesterday, Gigi Jackson of South Carolina had what some would consider, myself included, a tougher matchup. He's been kind of sporadic with his production. The coaching staff has been screwing him around a little bit. But on the road against Mississippi State, his PRA on DK was 15.5. I didn't care if he was playing, the Harlem Globetrotters at that point. I was falling all over myself to play 15.5 PRA for a player like Gigi Jackson, and he ended up with like 30. Now, Tyrese Hunter maybe isn't going to do what Gigi Jackson did, but that 15.5 PRA in what I expect his floor time to be and the kind of neutral to plus matchup to be way too low. So I'm not falling all over myself at 15.5 PRA, but these high caliber players with that type of PRA has been a very profitable move for us. I know this is PrizePicks we're talking here, not DK, but it's pretty low on DK too. Over 15.5 PRA for Tyrese Hunter. Lock it in. All right, DK has blessed us with some player props for the likes of some A10 games, such as George Washington, such as George Mason, and such as Fordham. So we're going to be able to delve in a little deeper here on teams that maybe you don't know a lot about or maybe you haven't followed. There are a couple here, especially in the Fordham-George Mason game. Khalid Moore, if that name sounds familiar to you, it should. Former Josh Pastner coached player from Georgia Tech. His PRA is sitting here at 21.5. He plays for Kyle Neptune's former team, who's now at Villanova, the Fordham Rams. Khalid Moore has a 25% usage rate, a 17% defensive rebounding rate, and he gets himself to the foul line at a very high clip. These are all things he didn't really do at Georgia Tech, but he wasn't given high minutes. He has a high turnover rate, so I wouldn't we don't have to worry about that with the PRA, and it's not a fantasy point thing. So he's on the floor a lot and turns it over a lot, but his usage rate typically in game is hovering right now in the last month of the season right around 30 to 31%. And he's jacking up shots with reckless abandon. So I'm a very big fan of this PRA number for him. I think it's a solid matchup as well against George Mason, and it's going to be one of the priority props for me. I'm also looking at, let me pull it up here, his point prop. So a double whammy here. Let's get it pulled up. Of 13.5. So 13.5 real points, 21.5 PRA. I'm on board with both. He scored 14 against Rhode Island recently, and then 19 against Loyola Chicago, 22 against Davidson, 19 against UMass. He did struggle against VCU, only 4 points, but that's a VCU defense that makes everybody struggle. His usage rate in that game in 19 minutes only was still 30%. Expect him to play 30-plus minutes here tonight. I like Khalid Moore's props. In on them heavy. George Washington Davidson game. I like Brennan Adams to score over 16.5 real points. It's minus 120 right now. It's not too crazily juiced, but definitely some upside there, 20 plus. Davidson is a very fantasy friendly defense. They play at a pace that just is conducive to scoring a lot. So Brennan Adams over 16.5 real points is where my head is at there. And then we got to go into the Pittsburgh Notre Dame game. Of course, we have some heavily juiced props here. The points are all like minus 130 and minus 125 for most of the players in this game. That's not horrible. I don't mind that, especially if you want to pair it up with a couple of different options. I will say that the PRA for Blake Hinson at 21.5 on DK is a slam for the over at minus 115. He's going to double-double here against this Notre Dame defense. I feel very confident in that. And I also like the Nelly Cummings PRA, which also happens to be 20.5 on DK like it was on PrizePicks. So I like both of those numbers. Very, very consistent with my plays here on this slate. I'm rolling with both. I like quite a bit. And they have Tyrese Hunter at 15.5 there on DK. So we can hit them both on PrizePicks and DK for the gentleman that was asking for player props. And then last one I want to give you, LSU, Missouri. KJ Williams PRA is probably too high for us to hit at 28.5. That seems a little excessive, but I do think he's going to score a lot of points. A lot of individual bucket getting is going to be happening for KJ Williams. And looking at his point prop, they do have it at 18.5. That might seem high to you, but I think that he's probably going to flirt with 30 real points here, and you're getting a decent amount of value at minus 115. You can pair that up with another one. They do offer at DK right now same game parlays for props, which have been really profitable as well. I do load those in the FTNBets.com tracker, so you'll see some of that stuff later as I add them once I get done with the show here. All right, I think that is it. Let's see. ND at home plus 3.5. They're shorthanded, man. But I mean, anytime a home team is a dog, you got to definitely consider it. So I don't hate that at all. I just think that they're not a very good team, but Pittsburgh is probably playing over their heads a little bit right now. So I could definitely see that panning out the way you think it will. Some of the lines, or one or two that I like here. By the way, how can we not get Tulane on the slate, man? At this point, we got to have Tulane on the slate like every single time. I think it's sad when they're not. Gonzaga's playing Chicago State tonight, by the way. It's plus 27.5 for Chicago State. They almost beat Stanford recently, and I know Stanford's a lot worse than Gonzaga, but that's a lot of points. A lot of points there. Chicago State team's scrappy, so kind of like that plus 27.5 if somebody's looking for a bet to throw in a parlay and make it a little juicier. That one's nice. Tulane versus ECU tonight. Why they're not on the slate, I don't know. It makes me sad, but look for Tulane to take care of business against ECU. They're minus 6.5. I think Tulane has a much better game than they had over the weekend. Look for my man Jalen Cook to go ham as he normally does. Jalen Forbes, Kevin Cross, big bounce back there. I like minus 6.5 for Tulane to win against ECU. Texas plus 3 versus TCU looks pretty nice to me as well. If you're looking for a small road dog, plus 3 for Texas is one that I certainly like. And as we get into these conference tournaments here, we're going to be posting more previews and more bets. The one here, let me pull it up and see what the line is now. For the Big South, Charleston Southern plus 3 versus High Point. I like Charleston Southern to actually win that game outright at plus 120 if you want to sprinkle the money line. But that is what I have. I appreciate everybody who tuned in to check out the day show that maybe don't get a chance to see me live late at night or haven't seen the show quite yet. We'll be back tomorrow morning, same time, 11 a.m. PST, 2 p.m. EST to break down the slate in full from a DFS, fantasy, prop, and betting standpoint. Appreciate the continued support from everybody. Make sure before you leave, you drop a like on the video. Helps me out a great deal. Lots of luck out there. If you're in the queue, get out there and win that. Bink lots of tournaments. Don't be afraid to tweet me tonight if you win anything substantial or a little win. I'm happy with any green screens at all. Make sure you hit me up on Twitter. Give you your props. I want to see how you did and if the show helped you out at all. Appreciate it, guys. See you.